Compass Mining makes Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone. Start mining in as little as 48 hours with our turnkey hardware, online and mining directly to your Bitcoin wallet within 2 business days. Find out more at compassmining.io and get started now. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the home of power mining analysis. In today's episode, Anthony Power and I are pleased to welcome Cameron Morrissey to the channel. He's the Director of Operations, Facility Ops at Compass Mining. We've got a long list of questions to go through. Great to get an update on their facilities and operations in 2025. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below if you have any other questions for Compass Mining and if you've ever used any of their services. Now, with that being said, let's get into today's interview. Okay guys, that's right. Today's video, we've got Cameron Morrissey. He's the Director of Operations, Facility Ops at Compass Mining. We've had a number of the team on from Compass. We're looking very forward to this one. This is your first time on the show, Cameron. So thanks for making the time and we look forward to visiting today.
It's great to be here.
Most definitely. So this is kind of the standard introductory question we ask all of the members from the Compass team. Can you give us a little bit of background on yourself, how you got involved with Bitcoin specifically, and then how you ended up at Compass Mining?
Yeah, so I got I'm class of 2020 vintage in Bitcoin. It's a funny story with all of the COVID stimulus. I saw the inflation coming, and so I looked at Bitcoin and I said, you know what? The government's just going to ban it one day. And so I invested in gold and silver as an inflation hedge. Looked at it over the next 9 months and said, well, that was a stupid thing for me to do. And so looked at it a little bit deeper. And it was actually, I give a shout out to Lex Friedman and Robert Breedlove. They did a very good, lengthy podcast. And that's what really orange pilled me. And so in 21, I was just all in, absorbing as much as I could, and realized that I really wanted to transition my career into working in Bitcoin. And I'm based in Las Vegas. I kind of like to say I've worked for gambling companies before, so I didn't really want to work for one of the exchanges on the different coins and everything else. I wanted to work on the actual infrastructure, and there's no better place than mining. And so it timed out really well with my background and what Compass was looking for. Landed there as a training and development specialist to start out with, moved into a director of continuous improvement, looking at more of the overall operation. About 9 months after that. And then I just moved into the role of director of operations here right at the beginning of this year.
Yeah, that director of operations, when I saw that, and then I did have a look through your previous experience, and you've already highlighted the fact being in Vegas, you're some of the entertainment industry there, obviously, but it looks like you're very much a people orientated. You were doing lots of training programs, and I sort of like struggled to sort of see that link to director operations, but probably can sort of maybe explain a bit about how that changed, or what you've brought from the skill set from your previous positions and what you're able to deliver in Compass, and what that looks like on a sort of like a day-to-day basis, and highlight some of those, you know, the key accountables that you come across.
Well, you definitely hit on it there, Anthony. You were the only one that had some questions in regards to me moving into this role. Yeah, I come from more of a classical management background. Obviously, you know, I've been with Compass for over 3 years now. So, I mean, I've been in the weeds on a bunch of this stuff. But we have a number of experts in the field, whether it's our site operators, our data center technicians, Shannon, our chief mining officer themselves. We didn't lack for expertise in mining. What we lacked for is really more of an administration side of things. And I like to say, if I have an issue at one of our sites and my site operator isn't the expert, I've got a problem in that area. Like, yes, don't get me wrong, I've got opinions on it, but I almost always defer to the people that are closest to the issue. They're the ones that are going to have the better solution in most cases. What I bring is the ability to unleash Shannon on the world, our chief mining officer. So he can go out and source sites. He can arrange the contractors. He can spin up our new location in Iowa 4 that's our greenfield site that we're all thrilled about. He can focus on those issues. I can focus on the people issues, the metrics, the training as far as development of personnel, logistics side of things. So I can handle all of that stuff so he doesn't have to worry about it, and he can work on expanding our fleet, expanding our customer base, and all of that stuff. And so from a day-to-day basis, I'm working with the teams. We've got dashboards on how they're performing, repairs, zero hashing units, whatever that happens to be from a detail standpoint, and then moving them forward. A big initiatives that we're doing here this quarter is relooking at all of our SOPs, for instance. That's the boring, mundane stuff that every company needs to do, can get put on the back burner for emergencies. And so that's what I can keep front of mind, keep that balanced with our hash rate and our uptime and everything else on the site, but make sure that those initiatives are moving forward. So I don't want to put it like, I'm a complete noob as far as, operations are concerned or anything else, but you will hear from the team that I'm very much empowering them to run it within those certain parameters. But
so with that in mind, then, Cameron, talking about the logistics, the people, the training, the sourcing, Compass has a variety of different facilities within your portfolio. Obviously, you guys have the kind of the hosted model. You're now getting into the vertical integration. We'll talk about the Iowa site a little bit later in the presentation as well. But a lot of difference between the type of facilities that Compass Mining does operate. Can you talk to us from your perspective or your lens there? How do these sites compare and contrast? I know with some of your counterparts, they've said this vertical integration, the owned facilities is something Compass would really like to pursue. I can imagine that's a lot more logistics on your plate, trying to organize all the components of those owned facilities.
Yeah, I truthfully, from an operations standpoint, consider a completely vertically owned, integrated site easier to operate. I don't have friction with any third party at that point. And so when I have complete ownership over the operations, the functioning, the building, what equipment we're buying, when we're buying it, all of those things, I want to say it makes my project planning easier from that perspective. And you've mentioned it. We have sites where we have our boots on the ground. It's our team managing the miners, but it's somebody else's facility and hardware. In which case, when an exhaust fan goes out on a container, we're coordinating with them to get that replaced. If we need electrical work, we're coordinating with them to get that in place. And our site operators or owners are fantastic. That's why we're still with them all these years later. But it is just another layer of complexity on there. And then you get into the completely third-party hosted, where again, we've gone through and we've got the scars from years of having bad operators. We've got nothing but the best at this point. But it is more coordination because it's not our people on the ground putting hands on miners. And then you have the other part that you didn't mention, and that is our managed service business, where we're managing sites on behalf of other companies. And so it's their miners, their equipment, everything else. We're just have the boots on the ground and using our expertise to manage their sites for them. And that can create a number of different complications as far as what reporting they need, what their processes are as far as park procurement, that sort of thing. And so it's, kind of coordinating with them in regards to that. That's on the back side of things, where there's differences. Really, from the front side of things, being able to say, you know what, I don't like that exhaust fan that we have currently. Let's upgrade to something else. Or, you know what, we don't need that much. We can go ahead and get a more cost-effective model in there and be able to run the site more cost-effectively for the benefit of ourselves and our customers.
Yeah. It sounds like, I mean, we've had this with some of the miners who started this asset-light approach, and really it boiled down to control at the end of the day. And I think what you're trying to say there is when you've got your own facility, you control every aspect of it. Therefore, you're able to put everything into that facility. If you've got you're doing managed services, or you have a host facility, then it's a case of liaising with the other party to get things done. And that's where the challenges have been for certainly some of the miners who have been operating in that way. And I'm assuming it's the same for Compass Mining, who have a number of different strategies.
Yeah, and at the end, Anthony, I'll put a pin on this one here. 3 years ago, when I first joined Compass, we were a year and a half old, and the mining environment there and what you were seeing from hosted product, it was the Wild West. It was absolutely crazy what some of these operators were trying to get across and trying to make work. And there were no industry standards at that point. There still kind of aren't any industry standards at this point, but it was absolutely bonkers back in the day. And we've got the scars to prove it. And I know all of the other miners that went with that asset light approach have the scars to prove it, where, you had an operator that was perfectly happy with miners hashing it, 85% of the fleet was hashing. They're like, what's your problem? That's great. It's like, no, I have 100% of miners there, get 100% of miners working. And they're like, nah, we're fine. So it's definitely changed. We definitely, learned that lesson. But I will highlight the facility partners that we still have are the best of the best. And they are absolutely fantastic. We're operating at 99% plus at many of these facilities on a day in, day out basis. And they're just right on top of it. As much as I have an entire remote team of people monitoring everything 24 hours a day, their team is on it just as quick, if not quicker than we are. And so there are people out there that you could still run an asset light model with that run it really well.
You mentioned one really interesting point there, and you mentioned utilization there, and 85%. Why not 100%? As a sort of a question that we generally ask miners, how much effect does the weather have on sites itself? Like, do you see that across the board? That if you've got sites in different states, obviously the weather, does it have a significant impact?
Damn, does it have an impact, Anthony? I'm telling you, I've got all our sites on here. I've never paid attention to the weather more in my life than I have in this current role. It can be as simple as I've got guys today unloading miners in Oklahoma and getting them racked, and they're hurrying to get it done before noon when the rain is supposed to hit. It's as simple from an operational perspective as that. It is keeping track of whether there's a snowstorm going in and whether you have to go ahead and shut your site down so the snow doesn't get sucked in and through the miners. Cold temperatures, everybody was dealing with that this winter in the Midwest. There were issues with the new S21s, not necessarily behaving in the cold the way that everybody wanted them to. Other sites and other facilities that we partner with were having huge issues with that. Or just even getting people there. Like, we'll have sites where, sure, it's 10 degrees Fahrenheit, whatever that is, negative 10 in your language. It's 10 degrees Fahrenheit, but it's actually negative 20 in the cold aisle because of the circulation of air. And so weather has an extraordinary impact. And we haven't even gotten to summer yet. We were bringing a site up in West Texas just a couple months ago, and a sandstorm goes through there and the wind's going 50 miles an hour. You can't see because it's just brown everywhere. There were videos of trucks getting knocked over on the highways and everything else. And this is the sort of environment that you're dealing with. So weather has an extraordinary impact, even in places, Ohio, Kentucky, where you don't necessarily think, oh, we're getting extremes or anything like that. Thunderstorms going through those particular areas, snowstorms, everything else, it absolutely has an impact. And then, of course, there's heat, but that's what everybody talks about. But yes, weather has an extraordinary impact, if I didn't make that perfectly clear.
And taking it a stage further, we're not just talking about physically mining, we're talking about probably impact to staffing in those locations as well, aren't we, really?
Well, that's just it. Like, there's several times in our Nebraska location in particular where it was not safe for my team to go into work that day. And so, we're managing the site remotely. It's fine. But yeah, like literally it's, highway notifications of not being on the roads that particular day. And, these are things that last one day, 2 days max, and then you get back up and going. But it is a break in operations that you have to deal with.
It's funny you bring up the snow being sucked into the induction fans there. That was actually what I was envisioning, just getting through winter. We're coming into spring, and that's why I thought maybe we'd ask that question. Obviously, you guys have a large portfolio spread all over the United States, so I thought you probably see a lot of different weather in the Compass portfolio. Now, you mentioned obviously weather as being an operational challenge. The next question, I guess a good segue. In your position, based on your 3 years with Compass, what have you seen kind of as the biggest operational challenge in terms of building a large-scale Bitcoin mining fleet all across the United States?
This is not a cop-out answer, but it is changed. The industry moves so fast that, you mentioned 3 years ago, and I'm like, well, my big issue 3 years ago is I couldn't staff these locations. Well, that's not so much of an issue right now. Man, I hate to say it varies, but it really does vary almost on a site-by-site basis at this point. I could say it was personnel 3 years ago. Now it can be infrastructure related. It can be environment related, is what you may be running into. It can be local jurisdiction related in regards to power contracts and things like that. So it is somewhat unique. There isn't a common thread across all of them, other than really basically saying, taking that knowledge on how to actually operate the site well from an infrastructure standpoint and making sure you've got the infrastructure in place, whether it is proper containment and putting the extra time in regards to that. We still see operators, and we visit and look at probably a site every single week as far as whether to put miners there, purchase the site, whether it's a greenfield site, anything else. And so we have a good finger on what the overall industry is doing right now. And we still see those areas where there's just corners cut, not the right filtration in the units, containment I mentioned already, some networking issues that we'll run across. And so I think it's still a maturing of the industry. And I know I got a head nod from Anthony there when I mentioned standards in the industry. There's still not anything strong in the way of standards.
Compass Mining is your trusted partner in Bitcoin mining. Whether you're investing in one machine or thousands, our customizable solutions are tailored to meet your needs. We are your experts in Bitcoin mining, offering a platform where individuals and businesses can purchase hardware, host machines, and access a range of ancillary Bitcoin mining services. We also specialize in large-scale site development and data center operations. Discover more at compassmining.io and see how we can power your success today.
I mean, you've mentioned there, visiting sites every week, new sites. In terms of, we've seen Compass. I've been with Compass for 3 years now, writing articles. We've seen the growth. We've had many of the senior management team on podcasts now over the last sort of 7 or 8 months. From your perspective, when you're looking at these new potential sites, what are some of the key things that the top things that you're looking for? And also at the same time, what are the potential red flags that you're also trying to avoid when you're choosing the next site for Compass Mining?
So I mentioned infrastructure, and I will hit on that. If there's one hack, and this will teach everybody how to get around our initial look. If there's one hack, it's looking at their network and how their network is set up. If they've set their network up well and with care, that shows a level of detail that I know is going to permeate throughout the rest of the site. That's one big thing that we look at as an indicator. But we'll look at if they've got miners hashing, what is that utilization? Like what does that look like right now? I was just at a site, last week in Texas, and they were like, oh yeah, no, I mean we got 100 hydro units here, and 87 of them are hashing right now, and that's good. And sometimes we get it up to 92, and it was nice. It was a great site, but I mean, in my head, I'm like, my team would lose their minds if they looked at 87 or 92%, utilization. That's not how we operate, and so it gets a little indicative there. But infrastructure is really it, and then network. That's my big red flag that I look at. If the network has been set up with care, I know everything else is probably on the up and up.
Hey, then the next one was going to be about cost effectiveness and curtailment. So maybe I'll break it into two parts. You mentioned the weather being a big impact over the winter months. So for people watching that are maybe thinking about hosting with Compass, how does curtailment work within your organization? Some of the miners obviously receive kickback for doing that. Some of them don't. Some of them try and push the machines as hard as they can. Some of them really take advantage of the energy prices and the curtailment windows. In general, how does Compass Mining look at that situation?
Usually what happens is we end up building that into the price of our hosting. And so any curtailment contracts that the power company has, the utility, those get built in, and so that shows up in a lower cost of power for the customer. And so we'll take that contract and just kind of prorate that out throughout the course of the entire year. So you won't be a situation like, oh, it's August, it's Texas, you curtailed a ton, your cost of power is 1 cent this month, and then it's 8 cents come October or something like that. And so we'll build that in to the overall model. And so I like to tell people it's no fun to curtail. It's no fun not to have your miner hashing or anything. But every time you see that curtailment notice go out, just ring the register, because that means that, yes, you weren't hashing for 10% of July, but you got a 30% decrease on your power throughout the entire year because of that. And so that's the time to just kind of ring the register. And it's one of those things I don't want to say struggle to communicate to our customers, but it's something we always are communicating with our customers, is what the impact of that is and what the actual benefit to them is of that curtailment. In a lot of cases, we have customers that are new to mining. And so a lot of these concepts are very new to them. And so us exposing them to that and helping them understand that that's what drives that cost of power down, is those contracts that require curtailment. And so that's how we tackle that.
Yeah, it is kind of a unique aspect of this industry, I guess, compared to most. And the other component I wanted to ask you, Anthony just mentioned you're going through a site a week, looking at all these different data centers, configurations, networks. There's quite a range, obviously, in the amount of money that's put into data centers. Anthony and I look at everything from containerized mining all the way up to tier 3 HPC AI data centers. Where does Compass feel is kind of the sweet spot along that spectrum in terms of investment in the infrastructure, the amount of money you guys are spending per megawatt or per exahash? Have you found I know some people say kind of the 80-20 rule. Is there an area that you really like to focus on?
Yeah, containerization is kind of the default. It's not necessarily where we're going to be in all kinds. We have a little bit of a chicken coop design that we're running in Nebraska right now, and then also in Iowa. That's what we're looking to expose ourselves to there. The 80-20 rule is one that I'm a big fan of. But I think, that's not what we're shooting for by any stretch of the imagination. But we understand the needs from a site and infrastructure standpoint, kind of those pressure points, not 80-20, I'll say 98-2 is what we're looking at. And then also from a logistics and a staffing standpoint, what exactly you need on site to be able to manage it effectively. And so we're able to tune those things depending on what happens, whether we have, one person on site per 5 megawatts or one person on site per 7.5 megawatts or one person on site for every 3 megawatts that we're operating. We know how to kind of tune that in where it needs to be. Now, we do go with more of a containerized setup for cost benefit purposes. Like you can get into those containers for relatively inexpensive. You can put them up. We've got the know-how after years of experience of doing that from a networking standpoint, infrastructure standpoint, to get those things really humming. There's a few different ways that we tackle that I won't go into from containment purposes and stuff. But we can take relatively what would be considered cheap container site and with a reasonable investment, turn that into something that's going to hash at 98%. And that's something I tell people, I'm like, yeah, I can give you 5 nines of reliability on your ASIC and your hosting will be $2,500 a month, great. There is that cost benefit that's out there. And I think we've actually been able over the course of our history to learn from all of those site visits, all of that experience that we've had hosting with other partners, all of those things that are those triggers. And those points where you can kind of throttle the dial just a little bit here, throttle it back there, and really fine tune a site in. So long-winded answer to mostly containerized, but we operate, several different models out there.
One of the things that Bryce and me talk about regularly on our podcast is obviously things like mining difficulty. We've looked at that and effectively it's been like an additional halving for the miners. In this last 18 months with the global hash rate increasing, there's energy prices fluctuating, the price of Bitcoin, we don't know what it's going to be tomorrow, next week, next year. How does Compass adapt to these challenges in terms of, Bitcoin price, in terms of energy price, in terms of mining difficulty, when they're trying to attract, customers, and maintain customers as well at the same time?
Well, first and foremost, it's, we drive a hard bargain with the sites that we operate in. First and foremost is getting that cost of power down as much as possible, because that's going to maintain profitability on a long-term basis for our customers. And then being upfront as far as what the customers are looking at when they're looking at, what's the payback on this machine? What's the profitability, on this machine? How much do I have to, how much of my Bitcoin do I have to sell to keep this thing operating on a month in, month out basis? And so we drive a hard bargain as far as pricing goes, with, the miners that we're selling and the sites that we are operating. We're running that as lean as we possibly can. And so that's one of the aspects. And then the other thing is just transparency. Like you say, you can go to any of the models on our website and see what the profitability is, on a day in, day out basis, what that's been trending, all of those things. And I'll push back a little. I know exactly where the price is going in 10 years, Anthony. Just to be clear on Bitcoin, I know exactly where it's going in 10 years. So, but that's how we can do it there. As far as, older models, we still have a number of J Pros, in our fleet, in the S19 class that's still in our fleet right now. And one of the things I was proudest of in the halving cycle was us being able to give upgrade and retirement offers for our customers. Back in the day, like 15 months ago, if you had 3 J Pros, we can go ahead and move you into an S21. At that point, just easy swap. It's like, those are the sorts of things that just weren't available in prior halvings. And so we still go out there. The offers are not nearly as attractive as they were 15 months ago. But, we'll still help our customers look towards what's going to be best for them in the long term. And so we'll present them with offers on a regular basis, for that are still running, S19s. Here's what you can do. Here's what's available to you, and just try to keep them educated on how they can navigate this. And what we hesitate from making recommendations, but you can kind of see where we're going with it. We're very, very, very much partners with our customers in the mining journey. Them being unprofitable doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help us on a long-term basis. It doesn't help them on a long-term basis. It doesn't help the overall, network. And so transparency is the other way that we kind of tackle those issues.
Just before we come on to Bryce will come to some of the final questions. I'd like to ask one on when you're looking at new locations, bringing in the staffing to fit the criteria for those new locations. I mean, Bitcoin mining is a very relatively new industry. The oldest miners out there, the Hives and the Bitfarms and the Huts, the 3 Canadian miners, they're not even 8 years old yet. So it's still a very, how do you go about getting the right type of people to fill those slots when you're looking at new sites?
Yeah, that was the conference I was in. That's what brought me to West Texas last week, was actually a workforce conference in the local area where it was bringing together, the government jurisdictions in the region, and also the, community college, vocational tech institutes, and bringing them together and talking about not just Bitcoin mining, but data centers, AI, all of this stuff that was happening there in West Texas with all the energy that they have there. What I will tell you is, and I know I'm jinxing it for myself right now, but over the course of the last 6 months, we have not had too much of a problem sourcing talent that has experience in the industry. And I know some of this is some of the companies that have unfortunately kind of washed out or discontinued their mining operations. And so you have a pool of talent there that is available. You also, with Bitcoiners, there's that passion where they don't have a problem pulling up stakes and, and moving across the country. Our site lead is in Iowa, is from just outside of Atlanta, and he moved up for the position. And so we have those opportunities that are out there. So it's been much easier from that perspective. We do look for, preferably, I ask the question of people, have you ever built a computer? And most of this generation, at least on the, the male side of the equation, has built their own gaming computer at some point. And really, I can bring you in as a Tech 1 with that background. it's not, I'm not ridiculously tech savvy, but I can take apart a miner and put it back together again. It's not really, that difficult for anybody that's done it. And so we can bring them in, teach them some skills that give immediate value to the organization, swapping out PSUs, bolt-on repairs, fans, control boards, that sort of thing. And then we introduce them to basic networking. And so there's a really, I want to say, simple stair-step approach to taking somebody off the street and building them into a Bitcoiner that can operate a site in a short span of like 6 months, really, with, I want to say, on-the-job training that adds value to our organization immediately. My favorite story that I tell, one of our best techs right now, and I hope to move him to a site lead position here, sooner rather than later, started out as our FedEx driver. He kept delivering because you have deliveries almost every day. He's like, "What are you guys doing out here?" And, "Oh, well, what's this?" And he just kept asking questions. And sure enough, we had a position open up on the site as we were expanding it. And the lead said, "You should put in for it." And gosh darn, if he hasn't just been fantastic. But he had the curious mentality and was willing to learn and came with zero expertise and is absolutely fantastic right now. And so, luckily, mining is set up to be simple. Above all, just simple. You take an ASIC, it does one thing and one thing only. And so you can actually build in training programs for that. What I can tell you from a larger industry perspective is that we're looking for more and more partnerships with those local municipalities and local technical colleges, where we can have some sort of Bitcoin certification, get people some exposure to it. We talked about that 3 years ago with the Texas State Technical College about a Bitcoin, certification program, because they had high voltage electricity, they had networking programs, and just marry those two together, and boy, you got something going. And the timing just didn't work out right, A, with the downturn, and B, with what they were looking at. But now they're more aligned with, hey, we can get a certification for you in 1, 2, 3 months, something like that, where you can actually go out and get it, have a pathway to a job. So it's out there, and it's a way healthier environment. And I know I just jinxed it. And my next site, I'm going to have a brutal time getting people up further north than Texas. But
Texas probably has the largest concentration of mining than anywhere else in the world. So that would be sensible for them to start thinking about having accreditation for the skill set in that location.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's one of the main things that's on their minds throughout. When at that conference, I had people from Houston and Austin and Dallas, not just West Texas, that were in there, and they were looking for exactly the same thing.
That's awesome. We often talk about what the miners do in the local communities, and this is just a great example of that. And you mentioned the word curiosity, Cameron, as something that's integral to every Bitcoiner, I think. So yeah, a lot of people just want to work in the space and they're passionate about it. The final question for you, what's next for Compass? You can take this in a number of ways, either technically speaking, direct to chip cooling, or immersion, whatever you think there. Or we've heard a lot about forward hash rate and derivatives and things like that. So anything you can share kind of on the roadmap for Compass, whether we're talking facilities or financial instruments, people, personnel, whatever you think would add value there.
Yeah, no, just know we talk about the financial instruments, but we're careful to stay in our lane in those internal leadership discussions that we have. But where it makes sense, we'll go out with it. What we're most excited about is vertical integration. And so, our Iowa site, and I know it's been mentioned here before, is our first greenfield site built up entirely by us, staffed by us, operated by us, and we'll hopefully have some customer miners in there here in the next couple of weeks. That's what we're most excited about, in the expansion that's going to be coming along there in the next 6 to 9 months. We're looking for other opportunities there. The other thing is probably hydro. If you're talking technical from a mining standpoint, we do have a partner up in North Dakota where we're selling machines into, and it's our first hydro site that we're operating on behalf of customers. And that's proving to be very positive right now, really, really looking good. And some of the discussions that I have with other operators that have experimented with immersion, and not all of them have had horrible experiences with that by any stretch. It's just been, are way more interested in the hydro miners and what those are going to offer us as we move forward. And I think a lot of the fears that people have had those that have seen operations and how it works, behind the scenes at these mines, and the thought of introducing, water at all to any of these miners is just a frightening prospect. A lot of those fears are just being assuaged. It does look like the future to me. We'll see. I said the same thing about immersion 2.5 years ago, and that just hasn't seemed to have taken off at this point. But it's something that we're definitely looking in as well. So those are the two things that are on Compass's radar right now. But in all of those cases, to get to Anthony's other point, the price has to be right. It has to be the right situation. We are selling to a retail customer. So it's not like one of those things where we can just go to market and sell more shares of stock to keep our operation funded. We have to be presenting the retail customer with an attractive proposition for their investment. And so that's always a constraint for us. But I think it's a good constraint as far as moving the industry forward.
Just one final point you mentioned there with immersion cooling. I mean, I've been covering the miners for probably the last 5 years now, and I remember when miners started to use immersion cooling, and we spoke to them and we said we're going to start releasing some data about this. We've seen no data whatsoever from any of the public miners about immersion cooling, and I'm just wondering now, with you mentioning hydro and the positivity around that, do you think we'll start seeing any data come out from that technology? Or do you think it's a case of it's for each miner, it's their secret sauce, and therefore they're not prepared to give out that information?
No, I think you're seeing more industry standards surrounding that. It's not this, like on a fundamental level, there was just a mystery on what you're using to cool the miners in immersion. Like nobody would tell you actually what you were using, and so there's public discussions about what glycol mix you're using, in your hydro units. There's standard containers that are out there, Giga, a bunch of other producers that have the hydraulics that go along with it. So it's a much more mature conversation that's being had in regards to hydro than immersion. And I think that's what gives me a little bit more confidence to come on a podcast and say, I think it's where the future is going with it, is just because it's way more mature discussion that's being had surrounding the hydros.
Awesome. Hey, always appreciate the discussion. The team at Compass definitely has your fingers on the pulse. So I'll throw it back to you for any closing thoughts, Cameron, but truly a pleasure here. Very insightful, and we look forward to having you back soon.
No, I just I appreciate the time that you guys spent, and appreciate getting a chance to speak with you. Anybody that's interested in mining, we're an open book. You can go to our website, see what the sites are doing, see what their percentages were as far as hashing, utilization, uptime, everything else. You'll see where we're in the summer. You'll see where we're curtailing. We're always very just upfront with what's going on, helping to educate the miners that are out there. So any questions you have, you come see us. We'll answer them.
Thanks so much for the time, Cameron. We'll see you guys back here soon. If you have any additional questions, leave them in the comment section below. Feel free to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. We'll talk to you soon.